Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have Derek Schewman and Nick Lobert from HOMEstretch, the co-founders. Guys, how are you today?
Great. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, thrilled to be here.
All right. So HOMEstretch, tell me, what do you guys do? And how did this whole thing start?
Yeah, so I'll handle what we do and I'll let Derek talk about how we got it started. So what we do is we cosmetically get homes ready to sell. So think about a situation where a client's going through a death, divorce, downsize, relocation, and they got wallpaper, they got green carpet, home hasn't been cosmetically updated in 15, 20 years, and they just need help. You know, they got a lot of clutter in the basement, they got a lot of clutter in the garage, so they don't know what to do. So instead of hiring 5 or 6, 7 different vendors, what HOMEstretch does is simplify that process and make it super easy for the client and for the real estate agents to get that home prepped to sell. So we first will empty the home of all the trash donation. Then we provide full painting services, interior, exterior, decks, fences, whatever it may be. Then we do carpeting and LVP. We do landscape cleanup and home cleaning. And then some light handyman work. And we really focus on the cosmetics to improve the look of the property.
That's fantastic. So basically you're in the business of getting a house show ready.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, Derek, so how did this thing get started?
Yeah, well, you might be shocked to hear this given that we're sitting 2 inches apart from each other, but Nick and I are actually childhood friends. So we kind of go way back. We went to grade school together, played sports together, and then kind of went our separate ways after college. So anyways, kind of fast forward to 2015, I was out in Washington, D.C. I had just sold my first company. I wanted to move back to Cincinnati, Ohio, kind of be closer to family. So instead of, being in the startup game, I wanted to recharge my batteries. So I wanted to work with a new emerging company. And I found an online auction company in Cincinnati that was doing some really cool things by helping people sell items, through a stressful situation like a death, a downsize, or a divorce. This company helped them put it on an online auction platform and monetize it. So during my interview, I'm sitting in the lobby waiting, and the first person I see walk through the hallway was this guy. And I hadn't seen him in like 20 years. I was like, hey, Nick, what's up? How you doing, man? And, I ended up working at that company as Nick was already there. And, the chemistry that we had started coming back. And, I saw what a great salesperson he was and kind of how he filled in a lot of the deficiencies that I had. So in the back of my mind, I was already thinking like, man, if I find another idea that's worthwhile, like this would be a great team here, just kind of the yin and yang that we played off each other. But anyways, as we worked, with this company and as they kind of expanded throughout the nation, we worked with a lot of homeowners, helped a lot of homeowners that were going through stressful situations. And they were thrilled that our company would help them sell the artwork or the jewelry or the furniture. But more often than not, they'd always come back to us and say, hey, thanks so much for helping us sell mom's jewelry. That was awesome. It gave us a lot of money in our pocket. But what we really need help with is this house. I live in Denver and I don't know what to do with this house. It's in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm stressed to the nines. It's got wallpaper everywhere, and carpets, green, and the landscape's overgrown. Do you guys know of anyone who can help us? And at the time, Nick and I were just like, no, sorry. Well, maybe we can do some research for you, but I have nothing. But after a couple of years of just hearing that over and over again, like finally that light bulb snapped and we're just like, oh my gosh, like there is a huge opportunity here for a one-stop shop to help clients in stressful situations get their houses ready to sell. Like that's the biggest asset that anybody's ever going to own. They need to maximize that return on investment when that house does go up for sale, and they need help. So we ended up quitting our jobs in 2019 kind of on a whim. And we started HOMEstretch, or the early phases of HOMEstretch. So it's just Nick, myself, and his pickup truck. And we kind of went out to market to see, was there an actual need for this concept? So Nick's background is in real estate. He comes from a whole family of realtors. So he ended up calling some folks in his network to see like, hey, we know clients are stressed out in these situations, but you as a realtor, like, is there a need for a service like this to kind of manage your day-to-day process? Mm-hmm. And what we learned quickly is the realtor was like, oh my gosh, I need this. Like my whole time is spent kind of being this general contractor, trying to shepherd these carpet installers and these painters and these landscapers and these cleaners. And I don't get paid for this. Like I'm paid to sell houses, but I'm just kind of pushed into this role. So yes, if you have that easy button in that type of service offering, like I would certainly be interested. So we launched the company kind of with a lot of momentum and validation from our early users, and it kind of slowly but surely started to grow in Cincinnati. We started to get more and more momentum. We saw the need really start to take off. COVID happened, which was kind of interesting in its own world, but we survived through that and kind of made us stronger and more nimble and really kind of refined our processes. And then kind of coming out of COVID, the thing took off. And that's kind of where we're thinking to ourselves, where do we go from here? But I'm sure we'll get into that. But that's kind of the origin of HOMEstretch.
Wow, that is fascinating. So much is going through my mind right now because I think about the future of the baby boomer generation. And you have enormous potential in the next 10, 20, 30 years. But before we go there though, I've got to ask you, Nick, you rattled off a really concise list, which I thought was great, that you guys know exactly what you're going to do, what your wheelhouse is. What's a range? And I know it does vary, of course, based on the amount of work, but give me an idea on what a range might be that it's costing a homeowner for your services.
It ranges, yes, obviously. We'll do jobs anywhere from $600 up to $30,000. I would say our average is in between the $6,000 to $8,000 range per home to get the homes ready to sell. Some clients need the house emptied, they need it painted, they need carpet, they need landscaping. They need all 5 services that we do. Other clients, they might just need 3 bedrooms painted. And that's the great thing about HOMEstretch is we can work with a 32-year-old with 3 kids, and the kids have beat up the basement and the playroom and the family room. And they just need those 3 bedrooms painted. Let's get those areas looking fresh because everything else looks good. Then we can work with an 88-year-old client who has the original carpet, the original wallpaper. And that job might be north of $20,000. So that is kind of our range, and it's good because it really can help everyone because everyone needs a little bit of work prior to getting their house ready to sell.
Sure. So Derek, you guys opened your first corporate location right where you are, right? In Cincinnati?
That's right. Yep.
And so now you have 3 corporate locations. Are they all in the Cincy area or scattered around?
No. So yeah, in 2021, just to kind of fill in the blanks of where we went, Nick and I knew we had something on our hands. So we wanted to see, could we replicate this HOMEstretch process somewhere else, where we weren't in the day-to-day operations? Could we hire somebody and give them this playbook and see how they performed? So we ended up opening Columbus, Ohio as our second corporate location in August of 2021, where we hired a general manager and a project manager and kind of trained them up on our playbook and just kind of crossed our fingers and was like, how are they going to do? And is the need there? Which was kind of the other thing we wanted to see. Like maybe this was a phenomenon that only occurred in Cincinnati, but
right.
We think that, but we didn't know that for sure. And Columbus launched without too much support from Nick and myself, and they caught fire as well. And they've been performing incredibly well since they've launched. And then for our third corporate location, it kind of happened a little later in the process, right before we started franchising. That was more or less our test run where we kind of refined all these processes. We got some tech in place. We had this thing where we thought it ought to be, but we just wanted one more test run to make sure everything was ironed out before we officially franchised. So that's when we opened Indianapolis, Indiana. So August 2023 is our third corporate location.
Nice. Did you know that Columbus, Ohio is one of the classic test markets in franchising? It goes back for decades.
We did learn that after the fact. I know they have tons of stuff out there, Wendy's, and we see Donato's and all sorts of stuff up there. So it's a great market.
Yeah. You tested in a great market. It's certainly good. There's a lot of franchise history back there. And now since that time, now you've opened, or you have 4 franchise locations. You just opened your first one in Fort Wayne. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So you're in franchising. How does it feel?
It's exciting. We're excited because it's a great opportunity because the need is everywhere. It's everywhere. And we're excited to give other people the opportunity to run this business because we wanted local ownership in each individual market. We really wanted the people to have, strong community ties, someone who's willing to put the effort, the work in to make this happen. And that's part of the main reason we got into franchising is we realized local ownership it's always going to trump corporate ownership, us in Cincinnati telling someone what to do in, Phoenix. It's kind of tough when you're managing someone thousands of miles away. Whereas a local owner is going to probably take a little more pride, put in the extra time, the extra effort, to make sure everything is done properly.
Mm-hmm. Now, how early in the process did franchising come into your minds as this is a potential vehicle for us to grow?
Probably a year plus after Columbus started doing well. That's when Nick and I, and originally when we started this company, we didn't have these grand visions. It was just more or less like, hey, this sounds cool. Like, would anybody pay us money to do the service offering? Just like any startup.
Sure.
And when we checked that box, we got more excited. And when Columbus kind of started replicating the success we had in Cincy, then our vision started to get a lot more expansive. So that's when it was just kind of that fork in the road moment, like Nick was alluding to, of, do we keep opening corporate locations and we keep kind of going down that path where we could have, 10, 20 corporate locations across the country and we manage everything? Or is there another model that might be more beneficial to a concept like HOMEstretch, which would be franchising? And we thought hard about that. And at our previous employer, that online auction company, they took that former path. Like, they had all their corporate locations across the country. So we saw firsthand kind of the trials and the tribulations of trying to, manage people in Dallas or Atlanta or LA from one central location. And for us, it always came back to, HOMEstretch works best when it's a passionate owner that is tied into the community, that just loves delivering customer service and helping people. And in our opinion, the only way that we could get that type of person was to franchise. And so far, that's been proven right.
And that's great. And did either one of you have franchise experience in your background?
None whatsoever.
Of course, like none of us.
Yeah, that's part of the reason we, partnered with Rep'em. The Rep'em group has, they have that experience. They have that knowledge of what to do, what not to do, where to turn right, where to turn left. Yeah, we met with them, probably about a year ago, about 9 months ago, and it just kind of made sense for us because we needed guidance on that.
And so, Nick, when you decided to, this franchise journey, I'm curious about your research and, going into whether we should franchise and who we should go with, because I do speak to either emerging founders or people that are looking to actually franchise their concept. So I'd love to hear both of you, your take on like what was going on in your mind when you were thinking of franchising, and how do we get help with this? And obviously you ended up with Rep'em, but I'd love to hear more about before you made that decision.
Yeah, like anything else, we didn't know what we didn't know. So, the way my brain works is I want to absorb as much information as I could. So read all the books, did a bunch of blog research, as much as I could to understand how this world works, because it's so different from anything that I've ever seen in my business career. Like, just the nuances and how it works and how you sell it and how you manage it. Like, it was like learning a foreign language. So we really, took our time and tried to approach people that we had trusted along the way that had been in franchising themselves to hear, how did you guys navigate this? Like, what are the pros and cons of potentially doing it yourself versus partnering with somebody, like a franchise sale organization? And that probably took a year, where we kind of went down that path and talked to consultants and lawyers and all that stuff, trying to figure out like what the right path was. So it wasn't something that was necessarily a knee-jerk reaction to get us where we ultimately got. But I think Nick and I realized, if we were to do this ourselves, it probably would have taken many, many years to get to where we are today. So in our opinion, it was probably a lot faster and more efficient for us to get to market by partnering with somebody who knew what they were doing. And that was probably the most important thing for us, particularly with a concept like HOMEstretch, which is new. We're kind of creating this home preparation industry. We wanted to be fast, and we didn't want to waste years, while we struggled figuring out how the franchise mechanics worked.
So I'm curious to know about your strategy moving forward. You've got the 3 corporate locations. You now have 4 franchise locations. Do you plan on opening any additional corporate locations, or are you going just straight into franchising from here on out?
TBD. Our focus right now is completely on the franchise aspect. We want to make sure that everyone we bring on is fully supported and successful. So that's where all our time and energy is going to be for the foreseeable future. But, we are kind of having a Midwestern hub here. So it might make sense for us to add a couple more corporate locations, again, so we can test different concepts, so we can kind of experiment with different things that then we could then kind of release out to the entire franchise network.
And then, of course, one of the big questions people have when they do franchise in their mind is, do I just continue to grow regionally, which is what you've done, or do I blow this thing out and go shotgun approach across the country? What are your thoughts now that you're working with Repham? And I assume they're selling franchises for you. That's part of their job. So what's the strategy for you guys in terms of expansion?
Yeah, I mean, our goal, and again, this kind of came into fruition probably right after Columbus or 2021 when we thought we had something on our hands. Like Nick and I are passionate about making HOMEstretch synonymous with the home preparation market. Like we want to be the national leader in the home prep space. We have been an early leader on it. We want to own that market. We want HOMEstretch to be a verb. So when people are about to sell their house, they type in HOMEstretch, all over the country. So for us, the only way that was feasible was to get out quickly. And I think that's, probably not unique for everybody, but for our concept, we know that this concept, works for anybody who's selling their house. Anybody that's been through a death, a downsize, or divorce needs a service like this. So it is one of those unique services where we think it can get out, from a regional focus all across the country, maybe faster than some other concepts that, need to stay regional before they kind of get their bearings.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Nick, who would you say is your ideal franchise owner? What are some of the traits that you think they need to have to be successful?
I'd say our ideal franchise owner is someone who's passionate, about helping people, someone who's passionate about business. It's a fun business. This isn't just, it's not just one of those businesses you buy and it's just mailbox money. It's fun. It's enjoyable. You get to go into someone's home when they're stressed out. They don't know which way to turn. They don't know where to start, right? You can take a home that is, say, in pretty rough shape. It's been beat up for 20 years. It's got stains on the carpet. It's got holes in the walls. And you can transform that property within a matter of weeks and then turn it over to the realtor. The realtor's thrilled because they have a better product to sell because it's fresh, it's clean, it's freshly painted. The client's happy because they got the project done quickly. We show up on time. We provide a quote in 24 hours. We answer the call. If there's a problem, we fix it. If we forget to clean a closet, oh, I'm so sorry about that. Let me get over there in 30 minutes and clean the closet. So we do the basics, the business 101 stuff. So it's someone who's passionate about business and passionate about helping people.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that they have to be outgoing, and networking has got to be key, right? Developing relationships with real estate agents and real estate brokers, because ultimately they're the direct artery, right, to the clients.
Yeah, and that's another aspect we love about it too. Is my background sales, Derek's is more finance operations. So you kind of need a business development person, and you also need an operations person. A project manager. And what I like on the sales side is when we're networking and talking with realtors, I'm not asking them to spend money with me. I'm letting them know about a solution to some of their problems. You now have a referral source that you can rely on, you can count on, that's going to answer the phone, that's going to show up at 10 a.m. when they say they're going to. They're going to provide a quote quickly. So I'm just asking those realtors to refer me to their clients that are stressed. So we always say it's a win-win-win. We get to run a nice business. The realtor gets a service that's reliable, and the client gets an end product that is better than when they started.
Mm-hmm. What's a reasonable number of projects that a franchisee can handle at any one time, you think?
That's the fun part, is we figured out how to scale it. We started with 2 projects a month. We started with 3 projects a month. Now we do north of 30 projects a month in Cincinnati. Corporately, I don't want to get into too many specifics on numbers,
sure.
But, corporately, I think we've gone above 50 projects in a month, and we've figured out how to scale the business. So a reasonable number, it kind of varies on how many leads you receive, and how quickly you can scale. But we figured out all those formulas of how do you do 15, 20 painting and flooring jobs in a month? And we have that secret sauce on exactly how to do it.
What does training and support look like for you guys?
It's robust. So we have a 3-day training program in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have an online data repository of all the training videos, all the documentations, kind of everything that goes into HOMEstretch. And, like we talked about earlier, our goal, especially in this first year, as we're kind of refining everything, is to kind of bear hug all our franchisees and make sure that they are fully supported, trained, and have the complete knowledge of how to operate a HOMEstretch. So it's robust, and yeah, we've only had 1 training so far, but they're off and running. So hopefully we'll only make it better from here.
Oh yeah. It work in progress, right?
Always, yeah. I mean, it's
Always.
a corporate motto. Nothing's ever complete. We can always make it better, and we always will.
Yeah. Okay. So if I was a franchisee, how do I make sure that I am not getting ripped off by the subcontractors? And how do I know these estimates are the best possible price?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in and around the construction and subcontracting world for 15 plus years. I had my own painting company in Charleston, South Carolina for 7 years. So I have experience in this world, and it's really, you can kind of reverse engineer it.
Okay.
You can find out very quickly how much their guys are making per day. How much does your, paint cost? And you can just kind of drill down into it to make sure that you're receiving accurate pricing. It's not as complicated as you would think. If someone says, "Hey, I want to paint a bedroom," and the price is $3,000, well, obviously something's wrong.
Sure.
And that's what we love about this business too, is it's 5 services bundled into one. So we do have the ability to get creative on pricing in certain areas where we have to.
And we have all the formulas and support again to manage the subcontractor process. So we've seen it all over the past 5 years, and formulaically we know exactly who should get paid what, and we kind of dictate the terms in our world.
That's great. But technology, how does it play a role in the franchise?
Plays a lot. That's kind of my background. So, in a service industry like this, we wanted to utilize technology to scale, because that's the hardest part about a company like this is, how do you get yourself from being just that technician into being a business owner? And one of the main ways to do that is through tech. So we have tech kind of sprinkled throughout our entire organization, from, the consultation tools that we use when we're meeting clients on the job, to the scheduling tools we use to kind of get crews where they need to go, to the pricing algorithms that we incorporate, so any franchisee can know what they should charge based on a couple of inputs and clicking some buttons. And all that stuff kind of allows us to scale the operations side of it. So we'll continue to kind of double down on technology, and it's one of those things that we think can continue to differentiate ourselves from the local mom and pop competitors that we're up against.
Yeah, and I would imagine it doesn't take me long as a franchisee to get up and running. Obviously, I don't need a storefront, right? So how long would you say it generally takes for a franchisee when they leave training to get started?
It's kind of dependent on how fast they want to go. So we have a pretty robust pre-training checklist, post-training checklist, and pre-opening checklist. And as long as the franchisee is motivated and wants to move as quickly as possible through all these activities that we need them to accomplish, then opening could be within a month of training. Our Fort Wayne operation was faster than that. So it kind of, again, depends on how quickly motivated the franchisee is.
Okay. Is there an investment range that depends on the size of the territory? And I obviously assume it's territory based.
Yeah, it's in our item 7 of our FDD. I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I don't want to quote it directly, but I think the low end is 104,000 up to, I think, 179, somewhere in that range.
Okay. And the territory size, what does it typically look like for a franchise owner?
So yeah, our territories are based on households. So it's not a population, our focus on the home. So we want to make our territories big enough from a household perspective where each franchisee will have enough transactions to support a good business. So our minimum household requirement is around 200,000 households.
Okay. All right. So I know you're new to franchising, but so far, what's been your biggest surprise since you guys got started in franchising?
The biggest surprise, I would say, is the demand. People are excited. You never know. It's same when we started HOMEstretch are people going to need this service?
Right.
And we were like, within days, everyone I talked to was like, yes, 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 yes. So I could tell when we started HOMEstretch, there was a massive need for this. When we launched Indianapolis and Columbus, we knew obviously there's a need in those cities as well. And then I would say the demand and the excitement, about HOMEstretch has excited us. I would say the other thing is the complexity. I'm used to in sales, I have a service, I have a price, and I have a client. And it's a pretty even mutual exchange, and it's pretty basic, it's supply and demand. In the franchising world, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of guardrails.
Sure.
There's a lot of stuff that I personally was not used to in selling. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. That was a surprise for us as well.
Yeah, that's what I love about franchising. While I'm not a fan of regulation per se, what I love about franchising is that both hands are on top of the table, right? Everybody, it's very, very clear to the potential franchisee what the franchise is about. Everything is spelled out. There's no hidden secrets, and that obviously is to protect not just the franchisee, but to protect you as the franchisor. I think when it comes to franchising, we have these ideas, these goals on how big we want to be and how many units we want to grow into in a year, 5 years. And I don't want to get too far ahead for you guys since you're new at this, but what are you guys looking at for maybe this year? What's a goal for you guys on how many number of units you'd love to award?
Yeah, that changes kind of month by month just based on what we're seeing. I mean, without getting into specifics, our original goal is now far surpassed what we think we're going to end the year on, just given the early feedback we've seen from candidates. But again, for Nick and I, it just boils down to anybody that joins HOMEstretch, we just want to make sure that they're fully supported and successful. So I don't necessarily want to say our goal is to sell X amount of franchises. We'd rather sell, X amount of franchises and have all of them be fully supported, successful, and thrilled that they, took a chance on HOMEstretch and, happy with the career choice that they made.
Sure. And our North Star with that is, being the national leader in home preparation services. And the way we do that is bring in great franchisees and then support the heck out of them. So if we bring in good people and then we support the heck out of them, teach them all the mistakes we've made, all the tips and trades of the secret to be successful, eventually we will be the leader in the home prep services space. And that's kind of the North Star. So we don't say we got to get to this number in 18 months and here in 12 months. It's just like keep doing the right thing every single day and it pays off in the end.
Have you guys noticed if there's been a difference in your services or the demand of the services on whether it's been a buyer's market or seller's market?
Oh, I love this question. This is my favorite one.
In real estate, right?
Yeah, in real estate, correct?
Yeah.
It's a seller's market. In the Midwest right now, and I'm assuming in a lot of other cities, it's definitely a seller's market.
Right.
And the number of listings since we started HOMEstretch, the number of listings have gone down 20% every single year. Inventory's low. And our business is still doing really well and growing in those times. So I'm excited to see, not necessarily when it becomes a buyer's market, but when it becomes a normalized market where it's even, and like in my neighborhood, there's not a single house for sale, but what about when there's 9 or 10 homes for sale and one home is painted yellow with green carpet and the other home is nice and neutral? Well, the home that's yellow with green carpet, they're going to have to compete because now they have competition to sell their property. So we think we're positioned in a really good spot to get off and running with HOMEstretch, because when it does normalize or when it does become a little bit of a buyer's market, these sellers are gonna have to work even harder to sell their properties.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we go back to what I shared earlier about just the trends generation, to the baby boomer generation, which obviously they're getting older. That's a huge population that's going to have kids that are ultimately going to have to sell their parents' homes. That's going to offer tremendous opportunity for you guys as well.
Absolutely. My mom is kind of the beginning of the baby boomer phase. And, they're starting to downsize, they're starting to go to retirement homes. And yeah, it's a giant swath of the population that's going to need help, just having this transition. At a minimum, like my mom's home is nice and updated, looks great. But she's going to need help emptying the house. She's going to end up going to a 1 or 2 bedroom condo, and she's going to need help, disposing of all that stuff. And the house is going to need to be emptied and cleaned, at a minimum. That's what I love about our service too. It's most homes need to be emptied prior to selling.
At the end of the day, you're in the business of real estate transactions. Again, we don't care if it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. You just need activity.
Yep.
And are you seeing, though, there are some areas around the country, though, where we have this gridlock right now, right? Buyers think it's 2010 and sellers think it's 2021 and the banks think it's 1979. So where do you see some areas where this gridlock is causing stoppage of play, so to speak?
Yeah, we do. We see sometimes the stopping and sometimes there's a disconnect for like a week or two or a month, where the seller thinks their home's worth $3 million. The buyer thinks it's worth $2 million and there's a disconnect. But at the end of the day, when you're going through a downsize, a death or a divorce or a relocation, those transactions have to happen.
Right.
Those still happen. And usually, if you're moving, you got to move because of school districts or whatever. Water always finds its level. Eventually the sellers and the buyers are gonna have to realize like, well, I have to move and I have to sell. So eventually it always equals out. So we have seen little tiny lulls, but then, usually it's typical with seasonality, but it does always level out.
I think the other important point to to say is like a business like HOMEstretch, if you're looking at our corporate locations, you know, you don't need to have a big percentage of the real estate transactions to build a healthy business. For instance, you know, there were 16,000 homes that sold in Cincinnati last year.
Yeah.
So we worked on 2% of those projects. We have 2% of the market share in Cincinnati and have a very robust business. So in our minds, you know, what happens when we get to 3%, 4%? What happens if the transaction size goes back to 26,000 and we maintain our market share? So there is a nice, you know, if you just get a fraction of that by focusing on the good realtors that understand that there is a great return on investment for doing these home preparation services, you can build a nice business and then hopefully grow up from there.
Sure. And again, back to me being as a franchisee, my job though, right, primarily is to get in front of the realtors, right? Because it's a lot easier for me to get with the realtors than just to a marketing campaign direct to consumer. That's got to be exhausting and I would imagine just way too expensive.
Yeah.
Yes, you nailed it. Yeah, exactly. What we do is we network with them. We cold call them. We do presentations at their offices. We've now gotten to like a cycle in Cincinnati where we present in the fall, we present in the spring. So we kind of know all the office managers in the area and we just have set schedules when we go in. And most realtors, they have a Tuesday morning sales meeting and we present to them, let them know what we do, how we do it, our process, what they can expect from our services and the quality they're going to receive, you know, for their clients. And that's exactly what you do is network and talk with realtors.
Yeah. And the great thing about realtors is they love to talk. So to your point, we're not trying to get to a C-suite executive and go through that gatekeeper. Realtors pick up the phones. They like to talk to people. And again, we're not trying to sell them anything that they have to spend money on. It's more of a conversation to see how we can make their job easier, which is just more of a natural relationship building in.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, you're helping them do a deal.
Exactly.
You're helping them make it go smoother. What advice do you guys give to potential franchise owners when they're looking at your brand? Obviously, when you don't want to sell to everybody and anybody that's interested, but I'm curious to know, like, what advice do you give them when they're doing their research about your brand?
So yeah, we're looking for, you know, serious business owners. I think, again, our business works best when it is kind of that owner operator mentality or run by somebody that is a seasoned entrepreneur that knows how to build a business and a team. This is not one of those franchise opportunities like we talked about earlier where, you know, you spend $10,000 on Google ads and then you kind of sit back and the checks roll in. Like there are plenty of opportunities like that. We're not one of those. So we will definitely want to work with people that are kind of business junkies that want to build an empire, that like kind of robust business models and value propositions and kind of all that business 101 stuff that we bring to the table. So I would say kind of those serious business owners out there that love helping people and building deep community relationships, like we're for you. You know, people that want the passive income, there are definitely opportunities out there that might check that box.
Wow. I think you guys are poised for some incredible success. This is certainly a different concept. I haven't heard anything like this before. I wish you guys just incredible success. If someone was interested in learning more about the franchise, where would they go?
Yeah, they can contact the Repum Group. So John Taylor is our sales representative out there. He can kind of get everyone the information that they need and get them into our sales funnel, which is kind of very structured and robust. And we just want to make sure that any candidate has as much information as possible and takes this seriously because it's a big decision, as you're well aware. This is kind of one of those life-changing decisions, and you have to take your time and know all the information. And we've set up all these steps along the way. So all our cards are on the table, just like you said. And hopefully it's just kind of one of those matchmaking processes where they love us and we love them at the end of the day.
All right, I got one last thing. So I finish every podcast with the franchise tip jar because our community is so generous in franchising. So I'm not going to let you guys off the hook because you're new to franchising. If I was an aspiring franchisor, what would be maybe a piece of advice you'd give me before I franchise my concept?
Yeah, so I mean, my tip would be willing to constantly improve. As an entrepreneur, nothing is ever 100% perfect. You know, I mean, look at Apple, Google, you know, Facebook. They're constantly innovating, constantly pushing the needle. Sometimes they get to 75% and then launch and then figure out the 25% as you go. So I would say my biggest tip would be constantly improve, constantly work on your craft and just work hard, put the effort in. And it typically pays off when you're constantly willing to get better.
That's great advice. Derek, what do you think?
Yeah, I think like anything, any business owner, just think about what is the long-term goal? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Because I don't think franchising is for everybody. And I think it is a very serious decision that involves, big financial and time commitment. So you need to determine, why are you doing it in the first place? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And there might be some concepts that just aren't applicable to franchising. And maybe it's better to just go the corporate location route. So you really kind of need to take the time and talk to a lot of people and determine, is franchising right for my idea? And then if so, just make sure you take the time, spend the money, and do it properly, because it is a huge decision. It has great payoffs if you can do it right, but you have to kind of go through the process, not rush it, and invest all the resources necessary to build a great platform that, makes franchisees successful.
Guys, that is fantastic advice. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it and wish you guys all the continued success.
Thanks so much for having us. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.